In other words, cortisol makes you stupid. With too much cortisol in your blood, and because cortisol switches off the brain area responsible for long-term memory, the hippocampus, you have trouble to recall what you have previously learned, and you have difficulties to learn new things and keep them in your head. Welcome everybody, my name is Niklas and I'm a neuroscientist at Lancaster University who develops a drug to treat Alzheimer's disease, as well as a high-performance and flow coach. And today, we will have a closer look at stress, the hormones that create stress, and what effects these stress hormones have in your entire body and in various regions of the brain. And I also partially make this video because I got the feedback from someone who told me that she experienced a scary blackout one day. And she could literally not think clearly anymore, and she could not remember anything anymore. And my response to that was that is not a surprise, because that's the end result of what stress hormones can do in your brain. They can impair your memory. They can even cause blackouts. Anyhow, as always, if you're excited and if those norepinephrine levels in your body start rising, just hit that like and subscribe button for me really quick so that we can build an army of high performance and neuroscience enthusiasts together. And that said, let's dive right in. Now, generally, the stress response involves two main hormones, which are cortisol, also called glucocorticoids in animals, by the way, and norepinephrine. Now, when you're acutely stressed, for example, when a freaking saber-toothed tiger suddenly walks by, then the brain area that regulates the fight or flight response, which is the hypothalamus, produces a hormone that is called CRH, corticotrophin releasing hormone. Now, it's unfortunately not mentioned on the slide here, but the point being is that the brain cells in your hypothalamus, they send this hormone CRH to the pituitary gland that is on the bottom of your brain, and the pituitary gland in turn produces another hormone that is known as ACTH, adrenocorticotrophic hormone, and that one travels all the way down to your adrenal glands. And the adrenal glands are in fact one of the major hormone production hubs in the body, and they finally produce and release the hormones that trigger the stress response in your body. And these are the stress hormones cortisol and again norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is also known as adrenaline, by the way. And also for your information, epinephrine and norepinephrine, they are different molecules but very, very similar in fact, and the only main difference is what body parts they affect. So I will simply refer to norepinephrine from here on out. And that said, let's have a look at what the stress hormones cortisol and norepinephrine actually do in your body, and more important, in your brain. Because cortisol and norepinephrine, they change how your entire brain is wired and even how you perceive the world. Now, first and foremost, let's have a look at cortisol. Now, for your information, cortisol is depicted as glucocorticoids here because I took this image from a Nature publication that investigated the function of cortisol and glucocorticoids in the brain of mice. Mice or not, these things are just as true for us humans, so don't mind that. In any case, after cortisol is released by your adrenal glands, cortisol circulates in your blood and crosses the blood-brain barrier to enter the brain. And as a side note, there's a lot of junk in fact circulating around in the blood, and the purpose of the blood-brain barrier is to prevent that all of this junk gets into your brain. So more precisely, the blood-brain barrier only allows selected molecules, for example hormones like cortisol or glucose as an energy source, to enter the brain. Now, once in the brain, cortisol acts in 3 different brain areas, and these include the dorsal striatum here, which has many functions, for example, controlling impulsivity, action selection, and initiating actions. It's also the place for habitual thinking, by the way. Then we have the hippocampus, that is where long-term memories are formed and stored. So it's a very important brain area and very prominent for myself as a neuroscientist and Alzheimer researcher. And of course, we have the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is a brain area that is responsible for emotions, for emotional decision making, and is actually one of the most primitive parts of the brain. And what cortisol does is that it actually evokes a shift from one brain area to another. More precisely, what cortisol does is that it shifts from logical or conclusive thinking to reactive and habitual thinking. Now, logical and conclusive thinking takes place in the prefrontal cortex. That's unfortunately not mentioned on the slide here, and the hippocampus. Now, again, the hippocampus is the place where we form and store long-term memories, and there's all shifted away. So those areas are switched off and shifted to the dorsal striatum, to habitual thinking. Now, the overall effect is that it blocks the recall of things. So cortisol blocks that you remember things that you have previously learned. So we call it memory recall. And cortisol also blocks the formation of new memories. We neuroscientists call that memory consolidation. And the reason being, again, is because cortisol evokes the shift, so it switches off the brain area responsible for long-term memory, the hippocampus. And that is why, again, you cannot recall things you have previously learned, and why you have trouble to form new memories. To repeat this, in other words, cortisol makes you stupid. With too much cortisol in your blood, and because cortisol switches off the brain area responsible for long-term memory, the hippocampus, you have trouble to recall what you have previously learned, and you have difficulties to learn new things and keep them in your head. Simply imagine the nervous student who starts an exam and can't remember anything. Blackout. And that blackout again is due to the stress hormone cortisol acting in your brain. Another big problem of stress, cortisol in the brain shift from logical thinking in the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus to habitual thinking in the dorsal striatum and in the amygdala is that we become more reactive. So we become more primitive, we become more emotional, and we become more irrational. We think less because the brain areas for logical and analytic thought and long-term memory, again the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, they are shut off. That's also why we question things less. We don't analyze if there is a problem if we are stressed. And again, we have trouble to come up with new solutions when we are stressed. And instead, once again, we become more impulsive and we are less innovative. And there is in fact a good reason for that if you consider what the stress reaction was actually meant to do from an evolutionary perspective. Let's think about it. If you got stressed in the Stone Age, for example, then it usually meant that you were in danger and that you need to act quick. There could be a freaking saber-toothed tiger in front of you after all, so evolution has created this stress response in your brain to protect you. Now, simply put, if there's a saber-toothed tiger 1 meter away from you, then you don't need to be creative or innovative. You just need to run the heck away. And that's why logical thinking is shut off. And reactive and habitual thinking is dialed up. And yeah, when you run away, you don't need to explore new territory. You only need to know what places are safe and what behaviors have actually protected you from this freaking saber-toothed tiger in the past. That's why, again, you have more habitual thinking and more habitual acting when you're stressed. So basically, stress hormones give you a tunnel view. They hype you up to run away, to get to a spot that you know that is safe, or to act in a way in which you protect yourself. And again, besides that, stress shuts down everything else in your brain that's not needed. No need for logical thought, no need for analyzing things, no need for problem solving, no need for creativity, etc. Now, the problem, of course, is that in today's world we are constantly stressed, and the brain doesn't see the difference between a pile of work and a saber-toothed tiger. The brain has no eyes. The brain only sees the stress hormone cortisol. that is coming in. And as statistics show, 84% of workers are constantly stressed. That's actually a statistic I got from the Flow Research Collective, in fact. And that means that, again, the constantly elevated stress hormone levels, constantly elevated cortisol that provoke this brain shift from logical and analytic thinking to habitual and reactive thinking, that is a problem. Because again, what happens during stress? You're more inclined to run away from problems. You're more inclined to act in a way to protect yourselves. You are less curious. You don't analyze problems, or you don't think things through properly. And again, it's not because you don't want to, but it's because the stress hormones in your brain don't allow you to. They block problem solving. So, and in addition to that, of course, because the hippocampus is shut off by the stress hormones, you have trouble to recall information, and you're worse at learning new things in your job. Also, on the other hand, because the amygdala, the primitive center in your brain, is dialed up, you become more reactive, you become more emotional. So you might actually do something irrational in your workplace. Maybe you cry on the freaking floor. Well, maybe not. That's a bit harsh. Anyhow, the point is, if constant stress just blocks you off. You cannot allow yourself to be stressed all the time because it will massively interfere with your well-being, and of course it will interfere with peak performance, and you will simply severely harm your success in your relationships if you're constantly stressed. Now, with cortisol covered, let's move on to the other main stress hormone, which is norepinephrine. Now, like cortisol, norepinephrine circulates in your bloodstream, and it's responsible for the physical reactions that you get during stress. And these physical reactions include everything that you can see here on the slide, which could be that your breathing rate increases. Again, the blood flow to your skeletal muscles increases to run away from the saber-toothed tiger, of course. Then your heart rate increases. Other things would be that the blood pressure in your arteries increases. Your pupils even dilate. That means your guts, your intestinal muscles are relaxed. Because again, when you run away, you don't need to digest food. You just need to run the heck away, etc. And what you'll find is that all of these things, typically, it takes between 20 to 60 minutes for your body to return to normal after a stressful event, until all of the stress hormones in your body are flushed out. Now, prolonged stress can even be the cause of headache, depression, or insomnia. Now, in the normal circumstances, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, so your active and resting parts of your nervous system, they're always in sync. But in the case of insomnia or sleeplessness, what happens there is that the prolonged stress doesn't allow your body to return back to normal. And it means that you end up with an excessively active sympathetic nervous system, or in other words, you become restless. And it's basically when your head is constantly running and spinning and you simply cannot make it stop. And that is because, again, the stress hormones in your body, they just constantly hype and pump you up. Now, important is that during stress, blood is pumped to all major vital organs, including the heart, the lungs, the large skeletal muscles, and also attention processing areas in the brain. Again, we need to make sure that we get this, that we can run away and that we know what the heck we're doing while we run away. But the problem is the blood is not supplied to the frontal lobe or the prefrontal cortex. And again, that is where logical thought takes place and where we make rational decisions. Now, if there's a saber-toothed tiger in front of you, all you need to do is to run away. GTFO. Run the heck away. And to run, you don't need to think logically. You just need dialed up attention. And of course, you need all of the blood in your muscles to run away. Now, also, as a side note, because of the changes in the brain blood flow that you get from the stress hormones, you can also experience some dizziness, some lightheadedness, or even confusion during an acute fight or flight response or stress response. And also, the effects on stress in your brain, it's not a joke. As I said, stress makes you stupid. Now, according to the book The Explosive Child, that's by Grainy here, there's adolescents. Of course, they admittedly have less emotional control than adults have. Nonetheless, what he actually proposes is that those adolescents, they lose at least 30 IQ points when they become aroused. 30 IQ points less when you're stressed. And that is the effect of the fight and flight response, or when the amygdala, again, the emotional center of your brain, is also very primitive, takes over. And when cortisol shuts down logical thought in your prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, you just become more simple-minded. You're less capable of rational, logical, and reasonable thought. Yeah, and the IQ points, they drop down tremendously. Also, as a side note, norepinephrine also enters the brain like cortisol, and norepinephrine is actually what stimulates the amygdala, so this primitive emotional brain area. And the amygdala also plays a key role in fear and anxiety. And that is why high levels of norepinephrine in your body, of the stress hormone norepinephrine, can in fact cause anxiety and fear directly, again by acting in the fear center, in the emotional center of the brain. Now, I must say, however, that a completely stress-free life is also a really bad idea. Also, once the stress reaction is over, cortisol in fact helps you to memorize a stressful and emotionally arousing event. That is also why we remember those events in which we were deeply emotional much, much better. Could be the birth of your child, maybe your first date when you were all nervous, etc. But again, the point is cortisol helps you to remember all of these things. And in fact, there was a very interesting study done this year, as you can see here. The study showed that, as you would expect, less stress, of course, was linked to better well-being and less chronic diseases. And there's also a side note I want to make that chronic stress can even increase your risk of heart attacks, etc. Anyhow, that's not the point. The point of the study here is that less stress, so living a relatively stress-free life, was associated with lower levels of cognitive functioning. What that means is that those people who experienced very little stress, again, had a lower brain function, they were less intelligent. So, by the way, the people who did not experience any stress at all, it was mostly old, unmarried men, according to the study, which is sad. Anyhow, the point being is that stress is not bad. You need some norepinephrine to feel excited, in fact. You even need some of the stress hormone norepinephrine to get into the flow state, which is the most immersed, focused, and productive state in existence. I made a video about flow, so I will link it for you down there if you're interested in that. And of course, you need a little bit of cortisol, because cortisol also helps you to, again, memorize stressful events. It improves your memory. However, if you are constantly stressed and the stress hormone levels in your body are constantly too high, then again, the negative effects show, because the cortisol will block off your brain. It will do this brain shift from logical thought to emotional and reactive thought, to primitive. And as I have hopefully made very clear in this video, 80%, 84% of people, as the statistics tell, are too stressed. So make sure that you keep your stress at bay. Alright, to summarize the video briefly, now during acute stress, the adrenal glands in your body release the stress hormones cortisol and norepinephrine. And cortisol shifts your brain from high order and creative thinking that is taking place in the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex to a more primitive, reactive, and habitual way of thinking and acting. And that is in the amygdala and the dorsal striatum. So the end result is that stress can literally make you stupid because it shuts off the hippocampus, the center of long-term memory, so you have trouble to recall things, and you have trouble to form new memories. And always just remember the saber-toothed tiger. In a life or death stress situation, It makes sense that all you're concerned with is running away. Now, if a saber-toothed tiger is in front of you, then your brain isn't interested in winning the Nobel Prize. So again, make sure to de-stress if you're interested in being your best and again, maximizing your memory, cognition, and else. And on the other hand, norepinephrine causes the physical reaction that you see during stress and during the fight and flight response, which would be increased heartbeat, sweating, blood flow changes, so that means towards your vital organs and muscles, etc. And in addition to that, norepinephrine is also the hormone that triggers fear and anxiety during a stress response because it stimulates the amygdala, which is again the emotional center in your brain that is also responsible for fear. And that said, some stress is a good thing. But the problem is that two means again causes all of the memory inhibitions, etc., that we talked about in this video. So again, chronic stress is not something that you want because it blocks your anxiety, it blocks your learning, it blocks your creativity, and it blocks memory. And this is why you should make sure to schedule time for yourself to de-stress and to become your best self again. And that brings us to the end of the video. Now, it was a bit different today, with more brain insight, of course. So please hit the subscribe button and the like button if you enjoyed it. And let me know in the comments if you want more neuroscience videos like this, in this format. Also, if you're interested in methods that are proven to flush out stress hormones in your body, let me know. Just drop a comment real quick and I can make a separate video about that. Anyhow, make sure to wind down at the end of the day. Don't let stress take over and have a fantastic week, everyone. See you in the next video.